Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Rules Horror. Story 1. How to Play the Floor is Lava with Spirits, PGI Chapter 1. A place to share scary stories which contain a set of rules to follow. Welcome back. This file is focused on the floor is lava invocation. As a reminder, the object you must use is something that is warm. Not hot, just warm. Once summoned, the spirit will communicate its needs using the rice grains to write. 1. If the spirit writes in a language you do not understand, say the following phrase: I apologize, but I do not understand. Could you please write it in English, or in whatever language you wish to use? Do not switch languages more than once. 2. The spirit will take a shape of its own this time. Their shape should be relatively humanoid. It should be pretty short, too. You do not have to avoid mirrors. 3. Take off your shoes. You may keep your socks, but only ones thin enough to feel the temperature of the floor. 4. The floor will start to warm up until it is as warm as the item you chose. Once the floor starts warming up, get on some kind of item or furniture. Don't touch the floor, or you'll lose. 5. Small orbs will start appearing. They are half transparent and shine a bit. Go and grab as many as you can. There will be a random amount, always a prime number to avoid ties. Once you touch one, it'll disappear. Keep track of how many you've touched. 6. If you accidentally touch the floor, it's fine as long as you haven't felt the heat. If you did feel the heat, don't cheat, just sit down and wait for your playmate to finish. 7. Once the game ends, say how many orbs you've got. The one with the most orb wins. Please note, saying the wrong number of orbs will result in an automatic loss for you. If you win, the spirit will give you a coin of the currency you most commonly use. If they'll take a random coin from your wallet/pocket/ wherever you store those. 8. If the floor starts cooling down, it's just that the item losing its heat. If that's the case, they'll tell you to change the item. You've got 5 minutes to heat it back up or find something else warm and nice. If you're too slow, they risk to leave out of boredom. Once you're done playing, go back to the summoning room, and stay. I'm tired, thank you for playing. The spirit will not overstay its welcome and leave. The following rules only apply if you've accidentally summoned something bad. 9. You'll know it's bad when the item will heat up quickly. If it was flammable, it will definitely catch on fire. You'll notice a lot of your furniture becoming rocks. Climb on one of them. 10. The floor will become literal lava. Of course, it's just a trick, but it will still definitely burn through whatever you have as protection. Only the rocks can protect you. You have to find 6 orbs. Don't waste time. 11. Some creatures will try to stop you. Here's how to deal with them. 11a. Sometimes, you'll see bubbles in the lava. That's a lava fish. Just don't move too much. You don't want to scare it and make it jump straight into your face. 11b. If you see a face in the lava, that's a tortured soul of the fire kind. Don't let them get close to you. They'll drag you to their plane of existence, and this is the only time where we would recommend suicide instead of being dragged there, unless of course always feeling yourself burning forever is something you'd like. 11c. If the lava turns a purplish pink, try to hide somewhere. Anywhere. 12. Of course, you have a playmate. They will take the shape of a humanoid made of fire. They'll move around the house looking for you. They cannot jump or run, but they walk on the floor just fine. Don't get caught. They have quite the warm welcome. 13. Once you get all the orbs, go back to the summoning room and toss the item in the lava. Everything will go back to normal. The burn marks will stay though. I feel like the risks are pretty obvious, but let me remind you that being burned alive is the most pain one can feel. Find the keys. Maybe take a look into the older posts. Story 2. Do you get home by bus or car? A place to share scary stories which contain a set of rules to follow. Hello. If you are getting this letter, that means one of two things: you are now in 6th grade or you have transferred to our school. In that case, welcome. We have separate sets of rules for school and being in a vehicle being taken to or from school. Please follow these rules based on the letter: A. Bus, B. Car, C. At school. 1a. The bus will arrive at 7:08 and leave at 7:09. Never late, never early. If it's not there at 7:08, please go inside. This will never happen on your first day. We have ensured this. After all, you need to meet your guide/mentor. 2a. Sit on even number rows such as 2, 4, 6, etc. Odd number rows such as 1, 3, 5 shouldn't be sat on unless your mentor specifically told you. 3a. Once you have met your mentor, always sit next to them on the bus. They know more than you and will protect you if things go south. 4a. On the second day and after, open your laptop before you get in the bus and use it once you are on the bus until you have arrived at school. You may do anything on your laptop during this time. The laptops will always have Wi-Fi on the bus and in a 10 feet radius from the bus. If there is no Wi-Fi, tell the bus driver, "I can't, I feel sick." They may try and convince you to come on. Hold your ground. A fist fight will be better than going on. Don't worry, the bus driver won't remember a thing that happened yesterday, or anyone on. 5a. Only talk to your mentor and everyone they deem to be safe. If you disobey this rule, you must be quiet and slowly get away from them. Don't speak on the bus for the next 2 days. 6a. Ignore any screams, crying, begging, if any occur. If you see someone reacting, calm them down. It's annoying, don't you think? They must agree. 1b. Leave the house by 7:20. Keep the porch light off until then. You don't want the bus driver to think they left someone behind. 2b. Keep the driver's door locked at all times. Best if the original driver is still there when you're at school. 3b. Please be quiet, it's safer that way and makes the ride less horrific. 4b. Keep your face blank. Same as your mentors. If you see someone not as in, another passenger, or the driver, please remind them that rule breakers are not tolerated. 5b. This way of transportation shall only be used for 250 days, until you have graduated college in your respective field. 1c. Do not listen to any music genre below rock, pop, country. These genres they hate, you don't want them to associate you with it. 2c. Meet your mentor as soon as you get to school, only today you may be late to class. 3c. Be prepared to be pushed, shoved, or even stabbed if you don't get out of the way. We recommend doing this to others if you may be late to class. 4c. Don't be late for class. If you are, text your mentor and run to your class. If you can't find it, go to the designated safe room, it will be the safest place to be. 5c. Your computers are your easiest way to find safe spaces. Always have it open in an emergency unless your mentor specifically told you to. 6c. If you get Ms. Bliss, be thankful. Many try to be in her classes. She is very kind and caring. If an emergency breaks out and your mentor texts you to leave the class, she may deliver a screech. Do not listen to your mentor if this occurs. It is not them. 7c. Mr. Bliss is very strict and hated for plenty of reasons. Study, take notes, do whatever you can do to stay on his good side, unless you want a fate worse than death. 8c. Respect mentors, they know more than you and are superior, always. Train to be one. It will be most appreciated. 9c. If you know someone disobeyed the rules, do not trust them. It's not them. Thank you and please enjoy our wonderful school. You may soon be one of the mentors if you follow all these rules to the dot. Story 3. I house sat with something that resembled human and I broke an important rule. A place to share scary stories which contain a set of rules to follow. Daniel was a regular at our bar, visiting 2 or 3 times a week. Although friendly, he was quite reserved and didn't tell us much about himself. I knew that he had his own business which seemed to be doing well, judging from his good quality suits and expensive-looking watches. There was no red flag about this man as he never caused any trouble. Daniel was polite to everyone and he also tipped well. So when he asked me to house sit, I agreed. He looked tired and asked for a double shot instead of his usual that night. When I asked what was wrong, he complained about his coming business trip and how he was worried about leaving his house for a few days. I suggested that he could hire someone to house sit, and that was when his eyes lit up behind the metal-rimmed glasses. "That is a wonderful idea, Emma," he said. "Say, how much do you make working here?" $20 per hour. "Why? If you could take Friday off, I'll pay you $50 per hour to stay a night at my house." My eyes widened. It was almost ridiculous how much this guy was willing to pay to have someone look after his house. Daniel mistook my surprise as disappointment as he immediately continued in an apologetic tone. What was I thinking? Of course it's going to take more to convince you to stay at my boring old house. How about $80 per hour? That's Daniel, you are not living in a palace or some kind of haunted house, aren't you? Daniel laughed softly. Oh no. Not at all. It's just an ordinary house. You'll see there's nothing to worry about. It's just that I expect you to do a few things while you're there. Compared to what you're doing here, I'm sure it would be super easy for you. He said that in a very nonchalant way, like it was no big deal at all. Looking back, I should have been more suspicious and asked him right then about what he intended for me to do. It might have saved me from what was to come then, but I was blinded by the offer that seemed too good to be true. I told Daniel that he got himself a deal and that I would be at his house by 6 p.m. on Friday. Daniel's house stood in a nice neighborhood not too far from my apartment. It was an ordinary two-story house, a little old but looked rather well taken care of. I found the key under the mat as instructed. As I entered, I immediately noticed that there were some lights coming from the living room. I also heard the low humming sound of a television, which was weird, since Daniel was supposed to leave for his trip hours ago. I made my way to the living room and Daniel was there, sitting in a dark room illuminated only by the television screen which was showing some kind of advertisement. "Daniel? I thought you left." As I walked in, he turned to look at me. "Yes, he left a few hours ago," he replied, and that was when I realized this man was not Daniel at all. He looked almost identical to Daniel, but thinner and messy. Daniel always dressed well whereas this guy was wearing an old t-shirt, sweatpants, and some dirty indoor slippers. His hair was long and unkempt, and he didn't wear glasses, unlike Daniel. Something about him also felt off. His eyes were cold, almost emotionless. He also sat upright on the sofa, which was a weird pose to be in while relaxing and watching some TV. Sorry. I mistook you for Daniel. You must be his brother." I tried to hide my surprise. "Daniel hired me to house sit while he's away, so I didn't expect to see anyone here." He stared at me for a few seconds, as if he was sizing me up, then nodded. "Okay. I think Daniel left you some notes in the kitchen." The note was indeed on the counter. It read, "Emma. Thanks again for doing this. I apologize for not giving you a heads up on my twin brother, Thomas. He will be here with you while I'm away. I totally understand that the situation is probably not ideal for you, but please don't worry about Thomas. He is a little weird but actually very nice. As long as you follow my instructions, I guarantee that everything will go very smoothly on your side. This is the most important rule and I cannot stress this enough. Do not let Thomas leave the house under any circumstance. No matter what happens, never give him permission or imply that he could leave. He might try to trick you. Don't fall for it. He won't try to leave without your permission, so there is no need to physically restrain him. Please be polite to Thomas. It will make everything much easier. Entertain him if you must. He won't ask for anything absurd, so please do what he wants to the best of your ability. You can help yourself to anything in the fridge. You don't need to prepare anything for Thomas, but please join him at the dinner table as that's the polite thing to do. You can sleep in the guest bedroom. Close the curtains. Always lock the front door when you go outside. Keep the keys with you at all times. If you notice that outside is pitch black, don't go out. Trust me on this, please. Thomas won't harm you directly, but he will lie to get his way. Watch out. In the morning, please water my plants in the yard, If you sense that Thomas is angry with you, use this as an excuse to go outside and just go home. Leave the key under the mat if you do so. I'll pay you another $500 if you manage to keep the house clean and tidy when you leave. To compensate for your extra trouble, I left some extra money for you in the envelope. Good luck and stay safe. Beside the note was a little white envelope filled with banknotes. I gulped as I counted them. $500 in total. This guy was serious. Apart from keeping Thomas inside the house, the rest of the instructions are actually quite common sense. Locking the door, watering plants, sleeping in the guest bedroom, these were not absurd at all. Not worth the $1,000 on Daniel's side if you asked me. I still didn't understand why Daniel would need me to look after his house if Thomas was there already. Perhaps he didn't trust his own brother. Well, he did look like a deadbeat to be honest. One question remained. Why was Thomas not allowed to leave the house? He was a full-grown adult who seemed to be functioning like a normal person. I thought about all the reasons that could explain this rule, and all the possible scenarios made me anxious. I should have trusted my instinct and left right then, but I didn't. Thomas did indeed creep me out a bit with his gaze, but he looked frail enough and I thought I could handle him if he were to try something weird. In other words, greed got the better of me and I ignored my gut feeling. It was a big mistake. When I went back to the living room, Thomas was still watching the television. Hey! It seems we will be temporary housemates for tonight. That's fine by me. His eyes were still glued to the screen. I hesitated. I didn't want to share dinner with this guy, but I wanted to follow Daniel's instructions. I'm having dinner soon. You are welcome to join me. Thomas turned to me and smirked. I would be delighted to. To call the dinner awkward was an understatement. Daniel's fridge was a strange sight to see. Exactly half of it was filled with normal food like fresh fruit, pasta sauces, and vegetables, while the other half was filled with several Tupperwares full of raw red meat, portioned into some kind of morbid meal prep. I reheated a box of frozen pizza from the freezer and saw Thomas pull out one of the meat Tupperware. He emptied the container onto a plate and set it down on one side of the table. He then sat down and stared at me patiently as if he was done preparing his own food and was waiting for me to be done with mine. The awkward silence seemed to go on for eternity before the microwave gave a loud ding and I took my pizza out. "Enjoy your meal," Thomas said. For some reason, his voice sounded sinister. I dared not comment on Thomas's disgusting meal. We just ate dinner in silence. The sight of raw red meat with blood still oozing from it almost made me gag, but Thomas was eating the whole thing like there was nothing wrong. The way he cut and dug his fork into the meat was precise and rhythmic, almost robot-like. I couldn't help but notice that he seemed to glance at my direction a lot, not at me, but rather at my pizza. Finally, I gave in to his inquisitive gaze. "Would you like some of my pizza?" "Thank you. But no, I cannot eat that." "Are you, like, allergic to some ingredients?" "I guess you could say so. According to Daniel, there are a lot of things I should not eat," Thomas said. "But I would love to expand my diet. It is quite boring having the same meal every day. I heard there are many options around this neighborhood." "Well, I don't really know this area too well but I'm sure there are some decent restaurants. Could we go to one of them?" His request caught me off guard. "Hey? You mean right now? I would like to go out, please." The sentence sent a shiver down my spine. I immediately thought of Daniel's instruction. While I didn't understand the context or any reasoning behind it, I didn't want to find out what would happen if I broke the rule. "Well, we've already had our dinner and I'm not from around here so maybe it's better if you just ask Daniel to take you later." "Okay. That is a wise decision on your part." Thomas stood up and took his now empty plate to the sink. "If we are not going out, then we are watching television together." The way he demanded me to spend time with him almost felt like I was babysitting this full-grown man. While Thomas was calm and oddly polite, I inexplicably felt threatened by just having him sitting on the opposite end of the sofa, staring at the bright screen. Even without considering Daniel's ominous instruction, something told me that it was best to do what this man wanted. I regretted my decision to stay, but it was too late now. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I couldn't concentrate on what was on the screen. Thomas kept breaking the silence by asking me weird, personal questions, like where I worked, where my home was, and if I traveled a lot. His conversational skill was abysmal and I was an unwilling participant, so the conversation didn't flow or went anywhere beyond 2 or 3 exchanges before the silence crept in again. I wanted to tell him off, but didn't want to appear rude, so I endured his strange questions. The 7 p.m. news started and it was about a recent assault. The reporter was interviewing the victim, who was recovering in a hospital room. "This man lives in a weird-looking but spacious home," Thomas remarked. It took me a few seconds to register what he just said. I could not believe someone could be so sheltered and dumb. "That's not his home. That's the hospital." "Hospital?" Thomas repeated curiously. "What kind of place is that?" I could not believe my ear. Was this some kind of dumb joke? I turned to see if he was smiling, but he was not. He just stared back at me, patiently waiting for an answer. Then it dawned on me, this man must be mentally challenged. That was the only explanation. That was why Daniel didn't want him to leave the house, out of embarrassment or in fear of his own safety. There was no way a man in his 30s wouldn't know what a hospital was unless he had some serious issues that affected his behavior and learning. I breathed in, switching to a babysitter mode. A hospital is a place where people go when they are in need of medical help. So if I'm in need of medical help, I will have to go to the hospital, which is outside. Thomas murmured to himself, then he turned to me. So if you kill me, I would have to go to the hospital. Is that right? That's ridiculous. I will not kill you. Can I convince you, then? Again, what he said made my hair stand. His serious face made me feel like he was mocking me. No, and you are not leaving this place. I stood up, couldn't bear spending another minute with this guy. I'm going to bed now. Good night. Thomas just stared at me blankly. Okay. Good night. Don't forget to close the curtain. He didn't need to remind me. I grabbed Daniel's instruction and headed to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind me. The room was too close to the living room for my comfort and I could still hear a faint sound from the television. I looked outside the window and it was pitch black. Not having any energy left to deal with whatever was going on outside, I just closed the curtain and hid under the blanket. I considered leaving right then. But I would have to break rule number 6 and walk past where Thomas was, which I really didn't want to do. I didn't know what the heck was going on anymore and I didn't want to risk it. I texted Daniel, telling him that his brother was crazy and that I would leave this place first thing in the morning. He didn't reply. Despite being nervous and scared, I dozed off eventually. I woke up again in the middle of the night to a loud thud and the sound of metallic objects clashing on the tiled floor. I heard a faint cry and looked at my watch. It was 3 a.m. I really didn't want to go outside to investigate, but I did anyway. Thomas was weird and unpleasant, but I still needed to check if he was all right. I tiptoed past the dark hallway. The television in the living room was still on, but Thomas was no longer there. I saw light from the kitchen, and as I walked closer, what awaited me inside stopped me in my tracks. The knife holder was flipped, several knives were scattered on the counter as if there had been a struggle. Bloody handprints stamped onto the white marble surface. Behind the kitchen island, Thomas was lying on the floor with hands over his chest. There was blood everywhere. His white t-shirt was dyed red and blood was spewing from his mouth. Thomas! What the fuck happened here? I rushed to him and pulled his hands off. The knife was still there, buried deep into his chest. Help me! Emma, Thomas whispered. His face was as pale as paper. Someone broke in, and they stabbed me. Oh God! I'll call the ambulance right now. Panic swept over me. I grabbed the kitchen towel and put it over his open wound. Thomas grunted painfully, but he also looked confused. What are you doing? I'm stopping the bleeding, so stop talking. I pressed the wound with one hand and fumbled for my phone with another, clumsily dialing the emergency service. No. You need to take me to the hospital. I paused, my hands were shaking, not because of the horrific scene in front of me, but because of the realization of what I was about to do. Looking at his injury up close, I couldn't help but wonder how this man could still be alive. The knife plunged directly into where his heart would have been. There was no way he would still be talking coherently, let alone having consciousness. Thomas noticed my realization, and he shifted his demeanor immediately. He grabbed my hand. His voice was no longer trembling with pain, but monotonic and emotionless like it had been all evening. Emma, take me to the hospital. Can't you see I'm in immense pain? I will die if you don't take me to the hospital. And no. I tried to shake my hand, but he tightened his grip. A dying man would not have strength to do this for sure. Why, you lied, right? You did this to yourself. How the fuck are you still alive? Let me out. I need to go out. I promise I will spare you. Let go of me, you sick fuck. I broke free, but my back was against the counter and Thomas was in my way. I stared in horror as he slowly stood up in a puddle of his own blood, pulled the knife out from his chest and tossed it away. He smirked, but judging from the way he was glaring at me, I knew he was boiling inside. I had made Thomas very angry and he could barely contain it. You really are a resolved young woman. He just stared at me as I stumbled for the knife. Daniel made a correct decision this time around. Bad for me. But good for the rest of you humans, I guess. Stay away from me. I pointed the knife at him. He chuckled calmly, but then it was like a switch was flipped. Thomas grabbed the microwave and smashed it on the ground. If you just let me out, none of this would have happened. Give in already. You can't contain me forever. He went on and started destroying other kitchen appliances in a fit of rage, and that was when I noticed that his face was melting. Like candle wax, the color was drained from his face into some kind of thick fleshy goop combined with blood, and underneath was a face I would never be able to erase from my nightmare for the rest of my life. The face was dark, like a void of nothingness, with too many eyes and mouths that obviously belonged to different people scattered everywhere. Thomas, or whatever that pretended to be him, grinned with all of its multiple mouths, and started to laugh. His horrible laughter echoed through the hall as I ran back to the guest bedroom. It was almost like the house itself was laughing. I locked the door behind me and covered my ears. I could hear Thomas wreaking havoc outside for the rest of the night. He also begged and demanded me to open the door several times, each time with different voices, but no way in hell I was going to comply. The night continued to torment me endlessly. I didn't know if I had passed out, but when I opened my eyes again it was the next morning. Outside was bright out and the birds were chirping. I contemplated escaping through the window, but it wouldn't budge. My phone lost signal and I had no choice but to leave the bedroom and confront that thing outside. The house was a mess. Wallpapers were torn up and furniture thrown around. Blood splattered on the wooden floor and seeped into the carpets. Thomas really gave his all when he was throwing his demonic tantrum. I tried to make a run for it to the front door, but I couldn't do so without passing the living room. The television was still on, playing static as it had been smashed with a lamp. And of course, Thomas was sitting there in the exact same spot. He was waiting for me. He was back to normal, if he ever was normal before, albeit looking exhausted in his blood-soaked clothes. Good morning, Emma. Are you leaving already? I am just going to water the plants, I stuttered and quickly made my way to the door, without turning my back to him. Thomas didn't move. He just smirked. It was a lovely evening with you. I look forward to seeing you next time. I swung the front door open and ran outside as fast as I could. As I stumbled into my car, the phone gave a loud ding as it regained the signal. There was a text from Daniel. He had replied to me since last night. I'm sorry you had to deal with Thomas and I fully understand and respect your decision to leave. But please, don't forget to lock the door when you go out. I hope you remembered to keep the keys with you like I instructed. My heart stopped. I patted my shirt and pants pockets but the keys were not there. I must have left them inside the guest bedroom with the rest of my stuff when I left, and I sure as hell didn't lock the door after me just now. I looked back at Daniel's house in terror. The front door was opened. Standing there in a blood-soaked t-shirt and sweatpants was no longer Thomas. It was me, smirking. Part 2. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.